Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. On the podcast today is Amy Flurry. Amy operates an independent communication studio that assists companies in developing and implementing focused communication strategies that position them for the next stage of growth. She draws on her experience in the fashion and home furnishings industry in applying trend direction to product development and in expanding market strategies to connect businesses to the interior design trade. She is the author of Recipe for Press, which has 2 editions. Amy and I jump right into the business of press. We discuss why you need it, how important it is to first know who you are in business, and then what your goals are. Being ready for press is another consideration that we touch upon in great detail. If you're considering pitching your business this year in any capacity, this is the podcast for you. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Amy, welcome to the podcast today.
I'm so happy to be here. I really am. This is a subject that is increasingly exciting to talk about, oddly.
Right.
Coming from a creative.
That's exactly right. And I know even in our pre-conversation, we just talked about for a minute, if you have press, if you have marketing, if you have product, if you have services, but you're not making money on the back end from all of it and able to manage all of that, all of the wonderful things that the press brings, then it causes discontent and it causes imposter syndrome and stress. And so being able to manage both sides, like being prepared for what we're trying to go out and get, is super important.
Correct. And I think just as a creative, I'm referencing just being on your podcast at all and talking business.
Yes.
Because, I can talk about communications all day long, but more than ever, I see communications and commerce being so close to each other. But they need to be in tandem, not one is not going to support the other, like what we were talking about. They both have to have attention paid to them in order for it to be successful.
That's right. I was on a podcast with Darla Powell and Natalie Kraft. I think you've been on theirs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Darla was so funny when she started, and it's already out, so I'll put a link to it. But she's like, I really don't know how marketing and profitability go together. And I'm like, oh, girl, sit back. I got this one covered for you. But right? Because you can't focus. She gets it now. But she's so funny. She's like, she's so creative. And I think her point, though, is that many creatives don't see that connection. And when I said they're connected, they're in tandem the entire time.
That's right. And what I like about Darla, she's inquisitive enough. She's not scared to ask and then learn to put it together. And I think sometimes we beat ourselves up like, oh, we're supposed to know this already. We're supposed to jump into business and have a plan. Well, ideally, yes, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And it's okay to then take a step back and say, oh, I realize this is important. Now we need, I need to put together a plan. Or, oh, I don't have the marketing in place, or I haven't thought of press or communications. Now I need to consider that and put a plan in place. But always understanding the why. And I think I hear this over and over, like at the Design Influencers Conference this past week. Why are we doing any of it? That's most critical. And what are our priorities? And that will give us direction. Those 2 questions are really, really have to come first.
Let's back up for just a second. And I want you, because I'm telling you, if on my podcast, people have heard me beat that why. And I even have a course on getting your foundations in order, your mission, your vision, your why, your values, like the company plan, because that becomes kind of the hub that everything else comes out of. So we're so in alignment with understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then honestly owning our why. You know, but before we jump into more of that, I want people to know a little bit more about you. So tell us about what your business is today so that they understand kind of your background and the context that you bring to this conversation.
Okay. Because business today looks a little bit different than it even did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and definitely 20 years ago, but they all go together. So it is, I am going to just, stretch way back into my journalism days, where for 20 years I did serve as a freelance writer and editor for national magazines. And I covered primarily the Southeast in the homes and fashion industry. And I was a freelancer, so every story was new, and I had a lot of exposure, both to global companies and the way they were structured, and to boutiques that I walked in and then put on the national map by putting them in some heavy hitting magazines. So that's what, when I transitioned out of being a freelance writer and editor and producer of magazine stories and online magazine stories, I wrote Recipe for Press, and that was in 2011. And it was just a book. I just observed how many people thought that they had to get a publicist in order to get my attention. And after I wrote about them, after I found them and they realized like, oh, that felt good, that moved the needle on my business, and I need more of that to happen. After so many coffees on that subject, like how do I make that happen again? Who do I approach? What's the pitch supposed to look like? And just giving comfort that it did not matter to me where the pitch came from, who the pitch came from, as long as it came in a way that gave me the room to consider it. And it had a certain few key things, and a certain few key things, mistakes that I saw people make over and over were not there. So enough of these coffees and workshops made me realize like I almost had the structure of a book, and I decided to write that book. And so I wrote Recipe for Press, pitch your story like a prose and create a buzz, maybe before this was even a popular concept of DIY PR, but I could see that in-house communication was going to be a big deal for both small, mid-size, and large businesses because of all of these social channels and channels of communicating that we now are supposed to be masters of. Because that's like, you're the editor of all of those. You are putting together many magazines or many thoughts, when you post on Instagram, when you create a newsletter, when you do a blog post, that's like many articles in my mind. And I'm trained in that, but not everybody gets that. And not everybody gets how you might look at that as a campaign and save yourself, a lot of time, rather than creating it anew every time. Gosh,
I remember seeing you at GDAC back in 2011 or so when you put out Recipe for Press. I went down and watched you give a speak and stood in line, got my signed copy. Yeah, and I remember thinking just how useful it was even for my clients, because you're right, a lot of the barriers had been removed where we used to. I almost think about it this way, and no offense to travel agents anywhere, but we used to not have the same access to even book our own travel. So we had to go through these intermediaries all over the place. I remember when I was in business 30 years ago, I had an admin. Like, who has an admin now? I mean, it's super rare to really, have that, because we have access to our own email. We were telling our son last night, he was talking about email. We're like, when we started work, there was no email. We had intramail, and that was a big deal, but we didn't have full-blown external email. That was years after we started working that even came. I mean, the internet wasn't there when we started working.
So it's interesting with the designer segments and ages, because you see people younger, people who are native users of these things, they don't have any trepidation to jump in and try. And sometimes they're successful, and maybe, in more 35 to 45, 55 age group is a little more hesitant to, because of this very reason, because that's how things were done. I
It's
also will
almost like
say,
this barrier. It's like this internal barrier that we think
yeah.
we've got to
But I tell
follow
you
some
what, I
plan.
tell you, these designers who are my primary audience now, of that age I'm talking about, are so capable. And once they get it, once they just understand, they're smart. They have businesses. They have businesses where they have full house projects. Sometimes they look at the younger ones that are like, oh, look at them. They've got so many followers. How did they do that? They're getting all the attention. Well, those designers are often still trying to get a whole house project also. So we don't
Right.
need to beat ourselves up over this. We just need to do it in a way that supports the business.
Right.
And
The
I think
business that they want.
that's right. That's correct. And the people they want to talk to and to be part of their community. And these designers are so quick to get that. I mean, so capable. It's a very creative segment. And I really enjoy the interiors community.
And now, when did you updated the recipe for press
So it
recently?
is right, but it's a completely new book because what happened was, and you're going to ask me about my business plan, and in 2011 when I launched that first book, did I have a plan and did anyone stop me from printing 10,000 copies of that personally? The answer would be no. I don't know why. The numbers seem to make sense. So I ordered that many books, and 10,000 copies arrives on a semi. And I was so terrified on the day that they arrived that I really could have lit a fire to them just to make it go away, because to look at even selling 200 books is a lot of books. And this was a DIY project. I kind of felt like, well, I can't like talk about selling things and using communications if I'm not doing it myself. So I got over that. I kind of swallowed that big, lump that was in my throat and just started getting out there and speaking, creating opportunities to sell the book. And what I started to notice was that the largest group of people in the audiences across the country were interior designers. From this speaking, from this positioning and consulting that I was doing primarily with interior designers, I was asked to be a creative director on a project management app for interior designers, which gave me even more exposure. And that is not a product on the market today, but the exposure that I got from that and the team building that I did really made me hone my audience to the interior design community. And that's when I wrote book 2. So it's a completely different book.
Yes.
Aimed at interior design in this community and manufacturers. And I did it because I could see in more than any other group of professionals that interior designers were going to have more opportunity in this department than they could handle, and that they would need to create a plan, but they would need to understand that they're very much a coveted group of professionals with great opportunity for exposure, but how to harness that and make it work for them. That's what this new designer edition is about. So it's a completely new book aimed at that audience.
All right, so now let's combine these two and further our conversation. So I find it interesting. I had a designer reach out to me early this week, and she had been around another group of designers, and all of a sudden she realized that she did not want out of her life and business and her design what some of the others wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of, and in the moment, instead of feeling empowered that I now know what I really want out of my business, she had a feeling of less than, which happens until you go back and look at your why and go, okay, I'm really solid in this. And so what we did was that she's getting press, she has opportunity, it's all happening, but it's not the opportunity in the press that some other designer might want, but that's okay. And so what I tried to say to her and pushed back on her was, what is your why, to your point? What is it that you want? What are your company goals? And does the press and attention and opportunity in front of you feed what you want in your plan? She said, yes, absolutely it does. Then you keep trucking. Let them find the press and the opportunity that fits for their plan.
And that's very
successful. We have to free
successful.
each other up. Yes, there's success in multiple ways. It's to your point of thinking, well, they've got 10,000, followers on Instagram, but that doesn't mean that they're doing whole house projects, 2 million and up. That means they're completely different things.
Right.
That we're sometimes looking at one and assuming that it has a certain meaning that it may not have. All those likes could have come from a peer group. Well, they're not going to buy from you.
Right.
Right.
And that's why this idea, that's why what I see right now happening from a trend, from a moment or trend point of view in this moment, micro licensing, micro influencers, community. Suddenly people are realizing like all those numbers don't mean anything if people are not engaged with you in the right space. So what is beginning to be more valued by brands, probably by clients, are, people with true point of view, engagement, whether that's like, maybe you have smaller audiences if we're talking about, audiences and followers, sure. But they're really committed and engaged. That's valuable. And I think that kind of runs parallel to clients. It's certainly true for my own business. And we just have to check ourselves sometimes, because I know there was a point in my business after, when I was coming off of a lot of exposure, and at the time, had a lot of opportunities coming to me, and I kind of felt like, and they weren't right for me. They didn't match up with my priorities. And these priorities, I wasn't saying this is my priority for 20 years or 10 years. It's like for the next 3 years, I know what, I want. And that first one was I wanted to see my daughter through high school and be around as much as I could. I don't mean I'm always here, but that was number one. And so those bigger opportunities did not support that. And I kept having to pass on these things. But I always checked into those, knowing that they wouldn't always stay there. This next phase of life would come, but that really helped me to just hold my plan gracefully. And that's not
without regret.
And without regret. And that was not to say that some days I didn't feel like, oh man, will they ever come back? Will people notice? Well, I found out in the time I just stuck to my plan, people notice. And it really, in fact, that plan fed me as a person as well, really supported the creative way in which I like to do things. And the slowness was not slow at all, I mean,
right.
The right people paid attention and noticed. And so sometimes I'm just saying it can feel like, oh, everybody's just speeding on by. It doesn't matter. This is your unique life. You get to design it,
Exactly. I'll tell you, I had a very similar experience to that. My business shifted around 6 years ago into more of the coaching and the consulting, where I had been doing education and had owned
I remember
a school with a group of people, and had really been focused on that side, putting out just a small trade publication every other month for 4 years. So I had done that, and then my business shifted. And at the same time, I had a son in, I think, 9th grade and one in the 12th grade. And my goal was to make sure, like you, that I could be home I needed to grow my business. I wanted to grow my business.
Correct.
But I wanted to do it and not miss Friday night football, because my kids were on drumline, and they were on that field on Friday night. And I wasn't ever going to get that opportunity again. That one would not come around.
And if we're honest, it's not just about them. I know that gave you a lot of joy.
Oh, I loved it.
I know myself enough to know what gives me joy too. So
I wanted to be there. You're right. It wasn't just for them. It was family. It was the whole thing. And so when opportunities would come, I would say, am I going to be able to be home on Friday? Am I going to be able to be with my family doing these things? That was important. I knew I had a small amount of time. And then I'm in a position now where my oldest is graduated with a couple of degrees and out in the working world. And my youngest is a junior in college. So they're gone, right?
And your business looks very different.
It looks very different
I have seen
now.
that. And I kind of watch and observe, you know, as we all can with each other, that there will come a time, if that's your plan, you know, or if it's mirroring something like this, that time's going to come and you're going to be on hyperspeed.
Yes. And that's kind of what happened.
You.
but all of the work, like you, it in some ways it felt like I'm slow, I'm holding back. I always felt like I was holding back the reins of a horse that wanted to run. That is the image that was in my head.
Yep.
That my business was a horse that wanted to run and I'm holding back. And I knew that it would get to a point that I could just like let go and you know, kind of just play with the reins and go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing it knowing that in maybe 10 years, it might come back that I'm pulling back again because there may be grandchildren or there may be travel or retirement or something else coming into my world. And so knowing that our press, the attention we get, all of those things, it ebbs and flows just like the rest of our life. And I do think that's super important because there's this idea, Amy, that I've seen that you've got to have press. And I mean like wild, crazy press out of the gate. And then you have to maintain it. And that's almost unrealistic to some degree.
Because why? Okay, so I'm just going to put my writer's hat on. Here's a tip. The easiest time to get press is when you are new. Okay, so that's why some people might get press right out of the gate because they're new. And all these publications run on new. Even sometimes you might not have a whole lot of projects or you have a product or, you know, you have a new location. So even a newspaper, they're looking for new. But then that's the only time. So that's why you might see some people like right out of the gate get a lot of attention. But then as an editor, I'm looking for material. I'm looking for substance. You know, I'm looking for new projects, new collections, new, you know, experts. So it makes sense sometimes that people think, oh, like right out of the gate, she got a lot of press or he got a lot of press. But that's not something you sustain. What I have always recommended is that communications would be an ongoing part of the business. You kind of need a steady presence in the places that matter to your business. One time, nobody's getting these Oprah moments anymore because there's too much opportunity. So it's very saturated. So you kind of need a steady presence so that the right people for your business recognize you. And when the time comes, they think of you in that moment for whatever you're offering. So that's kind of my approach, is that steady. Because if you have these wild swings, it kind of makes your business look unstable. It sends that impression.
Sure. You know, and sometimes there's this idea that, let's say we get a publication that, and I'm not saying it can't happen, that the doors are just going to burst open and 5,000 people are going to call you.
Doesn't happen.
That's not been the experience that my clients have had. But there's this idea that if you get in one magazine, that your whole life is made and you never have to do it again, right?
Right.
And it's not the case.
And poor publicists, this is why I never wanted to be like a PR agency, because it's a lot of pressure. And what they understand is the same thing I'm talking about. You need this steady stream. And it's kind of horrifying from an editor's end too, but also from a good publicist, they would tell you this. It's not going to change your life overnight. And especially, sometimes you can get big hits from online publications now, a lot of attention, or say like a Good Morning America moment. That's a lot of eyeballs at one time. Well, the next morning, somebody else is going to be on. So it goes away very fast if you do get that. However, that's why, and now there are just a lot of opportunities for exposure, and we're going to talk about how press looks differently than it did. I know, but to my point, back to a publicist, a good publicist would prepare their clients for this. Like, please don't come and tell me after your first thing that, oh, it really didn't get, the response I thought it would. And that's a big no-no for editors too, because it's not my job to get you business. It's the business of press is I'm an editor, I'm a writer, and I'm going to write about someone that excites me, that I think is a good fit for my publication. What my job is not is to determine or to think that it's going to move the needle on your business. And so one big no-no, but it happened a lot when I was a writer,
Yes.
was that someone would come back and instead of saying, thank you so much for spending all that time being an ambassador to my, to really taking the time to write something well, which was my only goal, to write something well about that and to make that person happy about what was written and how I interpreted. I would hear sometimes instead, yeah, I thought it was going to get a lot of attention, and I'm surprised that I haven't. And that would make me feel bad. It would leave a bad taste in my mouth about that exchange. And sadly, that would be the lasting impression.
Right. I think it's because there's this expectation that once is enough. And I'm not saying that there is not the once in a while, like, wild card that works.
That's right.
Right. But we watch on the internet where it says, do one webinar and make $1 million. Do one thing and this happens.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. I remember launching one of my first products and sitting there going, okay, now everybody's going to buy it because everybody told me they wanted it. And then everybody didn't buy. And I'm like,
what's also true is that you never know, because the things that you think are really going to move the needle, you'd be surprised that they don't, or that it takes a lot longer, or people maybe hang on to that article and a year later they're like, oh, I saw you in Traditional Home and I held on to, and that's when they, so it's kind of be a little slower feed, but then you can, this is why I say do not discount your community. Do not discount all of these areas, these channels of, that people are using, because you might have somebody from your local garden club write about you, and that would be the thing that people pay attention to. So sometimes, or very often, people think they need to right out of the gate go for House Beautiful and Elle Decor and
the big national press sites. Yeah.
No, you need to think about, like, what are your clients reading daily? What matters to them? Start there. Start communities. Start like maybe a neighborhood newsletter. Start regionally, and then kind of amp up that radius, then go that way, because national editors also want to see that you're a big deal in your own community.
That's right.
They want to see you've been vetted by those very respected editors in your community before they, share with hundreds of thousands of people.
That's right. It's almost, it is the same. You start maybe moving, saying you want to be on the speaking circuit, or you want to start, they want to know, have you spoken to the local groups that you're in? Will your local community listen to you? Now can we move you up? And I know we've done the same thing. And then even to your point about people, pulling out press, holding it, even Instagram, anywhere that we write, I've had people come to me and go, I already know you because I've read your blog post. So I know how you think, I know what you do, and we're on the same page. So I literally didn't have to sell myself. They read about it and had been thinking about it. And the same happens with other press. But I'm always shocked at the thing that I thought, to your point, would move the needle, would impact their business. And they say, but you made this comment. And sometimes it could have been that offhanded comment, or the comment that came after the comma, you know what I mean? It was an aside. And that was the thing that just resonated with them, that stirred their heart, that made them think, that caused them to take action. But it was never what I intended for them to take action on. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't written with an intent.
I do.
For that.
And it's about connecting.
Yes.
There's enough critical mass, enough information out there for that person to feel like they were connecting with you.
Yes. And so then that press, regardless of how it showed up, right, in Instagram, blog, newsletter, article, whatever it was, that information out there to them brought them back in at whatever timing was right for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask
That's
you
right.
this, Amy. What are some of the most used press opportunities today? Because it is different. We do have more. What would you say for interior designers, which is the majority of my listeners, are in that interior design field? What are some of the press opportunities today? Certainly, as you mentioned, newsletters, local community things, certainly within their own business, blogs, that, video
Right.
blogs, whatever.
Right. Okay, so we've started there, that you have probably your regional drivers as well. Like in Atlanta, we have 4 big publishing. I mean, this is a serious design community with supporting,
Yes.
magazines that extend. Those magazines extend into conferences, and then they are supported by the America's Mart and the Atlanta Decorative Arts Center. So we've got 4 regional publication titles, strong ones, and 2. I need to make this point because I was making it to a client yesterday. They're all talking to each other.
Yes, they are.
These editor communities are small. They will just as quickly pass a great project or idea along to a competing editor if it's not a good fit for them. Even faster, they will tell that other editor, competing editor, like, wow, some faux pas, some attitude, so
Yes.
the bad news gets shared faster. But I just know that community is so tight and they respect each other, and so they also share good things, especially when it's not a good fit. You can't help it as a person who looks for stories. When you see a good one and you can't use it, you want it to get published somewhere, so you will pass around. Okay, so let's just establish that. Outside of that, I would really recommend people read Business of Home and subscribe to their newsletters, because it is an industry bellwether. And I would say also Dennis Scully's podcast for the Business of Home. Listen to that. That comes out, it may be quarterly, the magazine. The newsletter comes out weekly. But there's my clients have been in that, and they get more attention from their peers nationally in that trade publication. So, okay, then we're now talking about trade. Designers Today, Jane Dagmy is doing an amazing job with that magazine, and that is a magazine for designers, not for the consumer, but it is a magazine for designers, and a lot of manufacturers are looking at who's being written about in that magazine, because maybe they want to collaborate with designers. So that's an amazing place for designer stories. Let's see, I still think there are influential bloggers you need to pay attention to, and the Design Influencers Conference was a great place.
Yes.
One of the best content driven conferences I've attended. So that's where you would go. Don't ask me who those bloggers are. You would go, look
Right.
to who's showing up there to find them. Let's see, what else am I missing? Oh, podcasts. Podcasts are incredible, because in print you get only so much space, and so much space for pretty pictures and for a quote here and there. On podcasts, here we are talking for an hour about our businesses, and there's a lot of opportunity to connect with your audience through podcasts that are very helpful, to the listener. And so they get that extended time to know you, to know your voice, to know your attitude, to know what you're about.
That's really good. Let's talk a minute about the networking part of all of that, because things don't just show up again, some things can show up overnight. I'm not trying to say that they can't, but sometimes it's about the networking, like going with the idea of networking. Not people can tell when you're scoping them out that I just want you to put me in the magazine, or put, you know what I mean? It's kind of, it's odd. Going more with trying to understand, what does that publication, what does that podcast, what do they need? What is their audience? Who are they speaking to? How can I speak to that? I know I just got a thing sent to me today about if I wanted to be involved in a TED Talk. But when I read what the topic was that they were talking on, I could have come up with something, but it wasn't a natural fit for me, right? Just like any other press. So I'm passing on it because would I love to do a TED Talk? Sure. But it's got to be one that goodness, you got 12 to 18 minutes. You got to be on point, and I want to be passionate. I don't want to force. And the same thing happens. You can tell when people are just like, there's like a shark in the water and they're scoping you out or something. Like, you want to start backing off. So can you just speak a little bit to like a gentle way to have conversation, to network, to be professional without coming across as that demanding negative that's going to be passed around? Because there is an art.
There totally is. And it is a fundamental of also getting press. Okay. So that would be rule number 1. Never pitch a publication before you have read the thing. Okay. And you're like, oh, Amy, of course, I would never do that. But
yes, you would.
Yes, you would, because that editor's got a big name, because she's standing right in front of you, because your friend was in it, because you've heard this and that. Well, editors, anybody, this is kind of applies to, across the board, but I know the minute I read that pitch, whether you've read the thing or not. And this is a two-way street. This is a relationship. I'm in the business of giving somebody press, and you want press. So that's step number 1. That's good. But then it's got to be a fit for my audience. And every month, say for a magazine or every podcast, you kind of have a formula to it. You're not going to change your formula for something fabulous that flutters in and flutters out. Something's working for you. So I need to respect that and to read it or to listen to it before I come, in pitching. And that's how you gracefully, when I show up at a conference or something and people recognize the book or say, oh, hey, Amy, they're able to speak to that. They just don't bum rush me and, say, hey, can I pick your brain? It's more like they're sending me a compliment. They're sharing something that they liked. They're asking a qualified, question based on what I put out there in the world.
They've spent time getting to know you, knowing what you put out there. So then it becomes actually a real, how many times, I'm just going to jump on this bandwagon, but how many times do we talk about be authentic? We have to be authentic in our designs, but we're not as authentic in our communication in this area. We are authentic with telling our clients whatever, maybe with our newsletters and blog posts, but then we kind of go into like weird world when we have these conversations. And so the truth is, if somebody said to me, oh, have you heard of my podcast? I'm not going to lie and say yes. I'm going to say, no, I haven't, but I'm intrigued. I have a podcast. Tell me about it. And have authenticity in those, even in those networking conversations. And I think it's our nerves. I think our nerves and our anxiety and our fear and all of that, maybe bravado for some people, but it all kind of plays into it. If we can calm that and just be in that moment and have a great dialogue and exchange, I think that carries more weight than, like you said, the bum rush of, oh my gosh, I got to be in your book. What can I do next?
Right. And what I see when it comes to press, so editors have to be a little more outward facing. I keep mentioning conferences because I had my new book came out last year, and the whole year I was speaking at these in order to why? To sell my book. I had a reason for being there, but I got to participate in a lot of the conferences and listen and everything. And every conference had editors there sitting up there answering the same questions that we're talking about. How do I get published? Just trying to demystify it a little bit, give a little more information, because they're saying, we need your content. We need you to be pitching us. We're looking all the time. If we can't get to you, we want you to pitch us, and here's how. Okay, so the editors were there, and then they come off the stage, and then boom, they can't walk because why? People are trying to pitch them at the spot. And let me just help you out here. That is not the time to pitch an editor. That is the time to, when you see them, to say, thank you so much for being here. That was very helpful. I'm learning from this. Here's my card. When I have something that I believe is a good fit, I can't wait to send it your way. That's it. Not
Right.
the time to try to pitch them or let me show you some
Here's
project
my
pictures.
iPad. Look at this picture.
Right. And that happens. So that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But it is a time, and that's where, we need to get the confidence. It is a time to introduce yourself. And that pitching is, before pitching anything, is about building a relationship, because what you don't want is one editor one time to write about you. An editor will go from magazine to magazine. They will write for more publications at any one time than you even know about. So for example, you might pitch them to one thing and it might not be a good fit, but they might say, oh, but I've got this on the side, I'm writing here, could I get a little quote for this? Or you might not even know that, but you want them to take you with them over the course of their professional life. So you don't have them writing about you once, you're having them coming back, and you've created a relationship that is reciprocal, where you have really good stuff to share over the lifetime of your professional life too. And that will result in many articles, many opportunities, not just the
Which
one.
is that steadiness that we spoke about. This makes me think about I need to look up who said it. Probably the listeners know and I don't, but the idea of seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that's what I think these conferences about, even to your point with the editor. Seek first just to understand what they're saying, but don't try to be understood in the same moment.
Right.
Give it a little bit of time to let it resonate, so that when you do reach out, you're reaching out in a calm way. You'll be remembered more than for sending something that is well thought out, well prepared and planned, than the one who knocked the feet out from under the guest as he came off the stage and threw your pictures on the iPad in his face. That you're not going to be remembered in a good way for that.
Right. And I'm thinking about just sitting here talking to you. Remember when we met, you asked for a meeting. It wasn't to pitch me anything. It was just to say,
I said, I want to know what you're doing.
That's right.
Yes.
And I said, hey, well then, looks like, based on what I can see, I would like to know what you're doing as well.
Right. Because I didn't come in at all and say anything about what I did. I just said, here's what I am, but I want to know what you do, how you help designers. I have your book. Right. You were writing the second one at the time. And
I did not have a clear website up at the time, which I do now.
That's right. amyflurry.com.
Took me a minute to consolidate everything, but that feels
good. But it was a great conversation, because
yeah.
I just wanted to know, where can you help my clients? Where can you step in, and what are you doing in this industry? Because if I know people that need what you're offering, I want to send them to you, right? Yeah. We offer completely different things. And I remember we got 3/4 of the way through and you're like, well, wait a minute, what do you do? And right. And we switched the conversation and I told you, and you're like, oh my goodness, I think I have clients that could use what you have to offer. And we still didn't work together with the same clients for almost probably a year after that. Before it really came up.
Because you're waiting, that's so indicative of press though. You're waiting until it's a good fit.
And the right timing.
Because to this point, sometimes an editor, and this is really hard for designers, because especially when pitching projects, it just takes a lot longer to place them. Because if you thought about it and you thought, I'm creating 12 magazines this year, and I kind of have general themes for each of those, but it's like putting a puzzle together. So the right timing, I might get an amazing spread, but it doesn't fit in the March issue. It kind of feels more autumn. Well, then I've got to wait until I'm putting together autumn. Okay, well, I've already got, a house in this region, so I might bump it to the next issue. So that's how that works. And that's why it takes forever, it feels, to place projects. And that can be tough for designers, but it's a slow, that's when you have to decide, well, is that what I want to be featured in print publications? So you would know that's going to take a little longer. Or maybe my channel is powerful enough. Maybe there's another online channel that would be a better fit, that makes me less anxious because it comes out, and I'm not sitting on it.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to make that call. And the beautiful thing is that there's just that much opportunity.
So what are the other elements that you think makes a pitch great? So we've identified that start in your local market and work out that that's a great idea. Right. We've talked about building relationship, network, and communication so that we're not knocking anybody down and being rude.
Yeah.
We've talked about the fact that even among the network of editors, there's sharing of ideas. So if a project doesn't fit, and we know that it takes time. I remember even the smaller magazine that I did, we would get things in and it might be for out before we could do it. But like we already had one on Roman shades. We weren't going to do a whole issue on Roman shades. I need to move it. And I remember them thinking, even with podcasts, that if we recorded it, surely it's going up on Monday. And I'm like, okay, we're about a month out from when this is going to show up. So plan out, tell me what's coming, and it's okay. But, we're in this world where we have cell phones where everything is immediate, up. And we've been trained for everything to be so fast and so quick. And this is, I think, the thing I would say about just even from my point of view with press is it's a lot more deliberate and intentional than we maybe have given it credit for. And with that, it has to be part of a bigger plan.
Yeah, it works so much better when it is deliberate. And that's why in the book, kind of towards the back, there's maybe even only one page dedicated to your plan. And that was intentional because your plan is not going to be 20 publications. If you really do what you just said, this is laying the groundwork and homework, and then you study those magazines, and then you study what you've got, and you say, okay, where is this a better fit? You don't want to pitch the same idea to competing editors, so you need to pick. You really, when you whittle it down, five publications, or maybe a publication, a podcast, a regional publication, a manufacturer newsletter, you can find a radio slot, sitting on a panel at America Smart. It's kind of also what I consider press and communications.
Yes.
Just whittle it down to only that many. And then you begin, you write the pitch. And the pitch these days, and this is very, very important here, it's so short. It's 3 sentences, a few bullet points would be helpful. A thank you for your consideration. Here's a link to more images. And then below that, in the same email, you want some supporting pictures. You don't want 40 supporting pictures. You want like 2 or 3. Understanding that the editor is probably going to look at the pictures first and decide based on those pictures if they're going to read your pitch. So the most critical thing would then be the images that you include.
So they need to be as grainy as possible, taken with a cell phone, with the cat sitting in the corner, right? That's what you're telling me.
The reason I put so much emphasis, and there's a really good example in my talk, and she's in my book too, of a designer whose work was fabulous. And I said, you really need a good picture of yourself. And she sent one, and I was like, that's a really good picture of you, but I think you might have taken that in front of your door, because I see the hinge and everything. And she was like, oh yeah. And she's a really, good looking woman. I said, that's not the kind of image I mean of you. I mean like an editorial style image.
Stylized, yes.
Yeah, and the thing that would be on your about page, because, and here's why, sometimes I'm not looking for a project at the moment you send your project through. I'm looking for a personality or,
yes,
something like that. So I'm going to go to your website and I'm going to look at that picture that's on the about page because I want to know a few things. I want to know, does she have an image I can use? Because I probably don't have the budget to send a photographer.
Exactly.
Okay, so does it look like it already belongs in the magazine you're pitching? So I know you don't go to installs looking like this, but it
you mean with the shoulder jacked
fabulous.
Is the selfie?
Yeah, you need to. This is aspirational stuff we're talking about. It's not behind the scenes. If you're talking about print publications, it's more aspirational. So it needs to look like it already belongs there for those reasons, because I probably don't have the budget to send a photographer, and because it's aspirational. And then it's telling me, it's also indicating am I ready to send all my readers to this person's website? Do they have it together enough that it makes me look good as
Yes.
a
Do
publication?
I want it to
Thank
be
you.
connected with
Yes.
our company? Yes.
So that's why it is worth it to get a good editorial portrait of yourself, maybe even one a year, that can change out because for all of those reasons. And you'd be surprised the difference it makes in your ability to get press. And that's just the cold, hard truth. I know we don't go to installs looking like that. You and me are talking this morning, and I was like, I pray to God this is not going to be a
Video.
video because I didn't have my editorial, pop of color on.
Yes. But
Not a big
isn't it
makeup
very
day.
similar to corporate where we were told, I know in all of my corporate training, all of my business training, you dress for the next position. You dress for what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, go in there looking like you already belong so that when they bring you in, they just assume that you already belong there. And it translates. It is the same thing. And I'm not talking about in a way that makes us feel so uncomfortable, because that also reads in a picture. I can look at a picture and tell if somebody is completely uncomfortable or if they just feel wonderful or beautiful or great in their surroundings. So you've got to also, there's got to be a comfortability.
Mm-hmm. And we're in a creative industry. So I'm not at all suggesting, an Olin Mills kind of thing. Yeah. You know what? And this is a good point. This is a good time to make this point. So where do you get that kind of picture? Well, look at the bylines of the photographers in the regional magazines that are really good, and know that those photographers are freelancers. They have the ear to the editors. So editors are always asking them, whose work have you seen? What's new? So that's a great inroad.
I'm looking for this. Have you shot anything like that?
And they're so close. That relationship is so close, but they are not working. They're freelancers still, but the relationship is really close. So they're always going to share with the editors something new and something fabulous. But they know how to get that picture. And so I'm also looking at a picture for a point of view. I always mention this group, Cloth and Kind, is a great example of that. They love fabric design. They love surface design, textiles. So when you see a picture of them, it represents their point of view. They're not in one color, they're kind of dress. They're in prints. It reads and shares and expresses their same point of view of the business. So that's also something to think about. I'm not suggesting, I'm just suggesting a great editorial picture, whatever your look may be. And a photographer who works for the kind of magazines that you want to be a part of will know how to get that, and they'll help you get there. They'll even, a good one would suggest, like, this place is great for light. This, they would help you get there.
Yes. And that's important. Yeah. I think the important part of all of this too is it takes a team, right? It takes a team. It takes you as the design professional. You need a great photographer. I mean, goodness, just to even go on Instagram and everything else, you don't need to put trash photography out there or cloudy or blurry. It's not good. It's not a great representation, no matter where it is, for somebody to look at the first thing. So we need to be cautious and careful. We need a great relationship building with the editor or with other people. And so I don't want anybody to think, granted, we may internally in our companies be doing a pitch and putting things out there, but I want everybody to understand, for this to really work well, you will, even if you don't have a team going in, you will create a team
you will. And I should say there's a whole chapter in my book on photography from somebody who is exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. And she shares these tips. There are a lot of tips that she shares on how to be prepared to have, this picture. Architectural interiors are also different than just portrait, so that person really needs to be seasoned in the interiors space.
Agreed. Not every photographer can do interiors. Oh my goodness. Just even from my 16 years owning a window treatment company, trying to take great pictures of window treatments.
Oh yeah, I bet that was hard.
Oh goodness, because of that light coming in from every window. and
Yeah.
you feel odd going to every house and saying, can we come at night where no lights go?
Right.
They're ready for bed and you're just getting set up with the camera. So if you don't have a great photographer who can, certainly take your pictures with an iPhone and then send them to somebody and go, here's kind of what I'm looking at, talking about just photographer. It's just not what you want for the ultimate.
Right.
If they've got 1 second to look at your picture and make a decision, you need the best that you can afford to do it. Let me just say this, because I get this question a lot, Amy, and that is, how do I pay for all these photographers? Because it is an investment. And I'll tell you, on the profitability side of things, one of the things I teach in my Master Your Profit course, which is kind of that profit first money management system, is to make that, when you make your plan and say, hey, I think I want to photograph 4 big projects this year. On average, what is that going to be in my area with the photographer that I use? Or I know I've got these projects. These really aren't press worthy. I just need great pictures. These are press worthy, so I need a different photographer potentially. Add up the money and start saving for it. Build it into the project. Move the money into a separate bank account, a marketing, advertising, press account, and use it. Set up a budget. When I talk teaching company budgets, have a budget for how much you're going to put towards these activities. These aren't free activities in some cases.
Oh,
they're
my
free
goodness.
aspects, but they're not free
Yeah.
to the business activities. You are paying, sometimes you're paying copywriters. Sometimes you're paying somebody to pitch for you. Sometimes you're paying for the pictures. Often you are. Those are expenses, and they need to be incorporated into the financial plan to support the marketing, advertising, press plan of the company. That's why, as deliberate as you will be with where do I want to show up, how do I want to show up, you have to be with, and will I have the money to do what I need to do to be there?
Well, I can only second what you're saying. You would be the one to teach people how to, how to budget for that. Some people budget it in their
Design plans
how
and
they
fees.
they price the design project. Okay, so some people are that serious about getting those pictures. All I can say to this, however you come by that, have a plan, but know that if I could only say one word when it comes to what would get you pressed faster than anything else, I'd say photography.
Yes.
It's that critical to positioning where you want to be and to getting press, because there's that much opportunity. But again, not everybody else has the budget to send a photographer to reshoot it, to recreate that moment. They're going to use your pictures. So more important, or as important, is to make sure you have the editorial rights to use those pictures for promotion. And that is something that you need to work out with the photographer. You're going to pay a little more for them, but just understand what a gift that is to be able to use it for promoting your company and for others to promote your company. But they cannot use it without it. So discuss that with your photographer.
And just one last thing on the photographer. I think we need to give them a shout out when we use the pictures. Even if there's this agreement, we need to let people know who took those pictures. I think that is super. Look, I know you can see all over Facebook and everywhere else now, somebody designs something and the homeowner never tells who the designer is. Like, they're taking credit as if they did it. And you know how it kind of makes your hackles go up. You're like, wait a minute, I did all that. I would say all the tradespeople involved, when it is appropriate, they're given credit for the work that they did. So I just have to say that, because it drives me crazy.
And it's a huge conversation in the photography world and on the legal side of that.
Yes.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that.
So are there any other big no-nos that we need to think about when we're pitching? So don't attack the editor. Don't send.
Okay, now I'm referring to my book on this one, because there are, in the book, everything we're talking about, I couldn't have consolidated it better. I probably couldn't do it again, but I did. It wasn't just me sharing this. I went to interiors editors. I went to a publicist. I led my whole book on DIY PR with a chapter on a publicist, because that's how much I respect a good publicist. Because as Christine Phillips of Viola PR, that's the first chapter. She said she knows you do not get to stand on the podium before you run in the race. So when you get to the point where you have the money to hire a publicist, don't think you're going to pass the baton and be like, okay, you got it from here. It's more work. You're signing up for more work because you've got to support that publicist in their efforts to get you broad exposure. You've got to be available. You've got to have the images. If you don't, they're going to get you ready for that. So just understand that. And I really appreciated her, so I'm going to read some of her top 10 tips, which I agree with. Some of my cautionary tales, like, okay, for starters, don't tell me you think it's a good fit for my magazine. I'm the editor. That's my job. That's my joy. That's what I get to do. Thank me for considering the publication. But ultimately, I don't want anybody telling me what they think is a good fit for my publication. And again, this is just straight talk. No editor is going to tell you this, but it's what every editor everywhere wants to do. Like, just please.
It's presumptuous. It comes across as presumptuous.
And what it also does, so a lot of people make that mistake. So you don't just write them off. It just shows that you're not ready for press. If you don't get that, then you don't get a lot of things about this exchange. That's going to be a headache for me. So I want to work with people who get it. And so these small things, don't send 150 shots of the downstairs, half of which are duplicate or blurry. I want 2 or 3 good teaser images, and then maybe a link to an edited box, Dropbox or whatever link, of further images, but not every image you took. Okay, I'm reading this from my book, and it makes me kind of chuckle because it's so forthright, but don't warn me that we need to make a decision within 24 hours or else you're taking it to another magazine. These are all real life stories, okay? And
I believe it, because people think, again, they think it's going to happen so quickly, but threats are not going to be the way to get into the magazine.
Yeah, don't follow up a pitch with a phone call. Now, there are always rules are meant to be broken, okay? If you have that relationship with an editor, once you have a relationship with this person, what you're going to find is they're going to come to you. You don't even have to pitch them. They're going to call you, and that's when you call them back. But don't pitch an editor and then follow up with a phone call and be like, did you get my pitch? What do you think? No editor wants to be on the phone, okay? And they don't want to be on the phone until they need you. And you follow up with an email. And the best help I can sincerely give there is put the same pictures that you pitched with in that follow-up email, because it's a visual prompt.
Oh, good point.
And sometimes, you get a great pitch and you're like, yeah, I love it. And then you get 100 more emails and it just fell off and you forgot something. When you get that follow-up that has the same images, it means to me that, like, oh yeah, that's right. I love that project or that idea. And it also means you're serious about getting press. I understand that if you're following up, the one follow-up you get, if I don't move on that and it's good, then you get to take it somewhere else.
How long do you wait for the follow-up, Amy?
I'd say with a project, you want to give it a few good weeks, like full weeks. Because again, the projects are just slower. But when you're talking a product or an idea that's timely, a week.
Okay.
Yeah. I probably don't need to just go on, because I have pages of, they just make me laugh though, because this is what editors have told me, but I also have the things that you do want to do, which are always more positive than my
let's switch. We've had plenty of negative. Let's switch to positive. So we do want to include 3 pictures. We do want to keep it 2 to 3 sentences, bullet points, straight to the point.
Right. Okay. So, and again, understanding that projects are just a little bit different. So you want to give somebody enough information to be like, okay, I'm interested. I want to see more. Now I'm going to ask for more. Make sure the project is finished before you pitch it. And this is a big one, because you get excited. This thing is almost finished and it's got great potential, but the first question they're going to ask is it finished? And you're going to have kind of blown your shot, at that moment to say, yes, it's ready to go. Instead, you're going to have to say, well, I've got a little bit here and I'm waiting on and you just lost the editor right there. So that's a big one. Make sure
And I
it's
can
finished.
see why people would want to do that,
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
that in their mind, they're thinking it's going to be 4 months out. Certainly I'll be done. And the editor's wanting it complete to go ahead and do the work to pre-slot it.
Yeah.
And so they're, the way they're coming out, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just different timelines. It needs to be finished, before. What was that? What we're supposed to be focusing on? Positive.
Yes.
The yeses. Trust your instincts. When things are a good fit for you. We've been talking around this and about this the whole podcast. You know when it feels right, or when you're trying to force something you've done to fit. If you feel like you're having to force it to fit, that's probably not a good fit. So really take the time to find the good fit, because that homework is like, so much of the pitch is in the homework. By the time you actually get to the pitch, again, it's like 3 sentences, a few bullet points, the pictures that you've put the homework into getting ready. Boom, that's it. But it's all the work in front of that that's really getting you ready. So take the time. Okay, so it's not a good fit for this publication, but so it's gonna be a good fit for someone. Or maybe the angle that I'm pitching this is really, I don't see them writing about things like this. That's a good indicator that they're not going to write about things like that. So find another entry in that mirrors what they're already writing about.
Yes.
Those sections of the magazine are the same every time. Same with a blog, so they're telling you this is the kind of thing we like to write about, and we're going to be looking for someone next to fill that spot. So that's, once you realize these are kind of formulas that you want to plug into, that's thinking like an editor. And that's what my books are all about, is like, you pretend like you're the one putting together the magazine. Would you put you in that editor? Does it make sense for that section? And once people get it so quickly. You just take away you answer a few questions, and I see how quickly people are like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. I was just trying to, I was making it more complicated than it is.
Right.
So I think what we're talking about here are perspectives. I need to, this is why you don't always write people off, because maybe they just don't get how I do things on the first try, but they're a good person, they've got good projects, and you kind of know it. And when I was a writer, I would see that and I would say, oh my gosh, this person is trying so hard to get my attention. They just don't understand that all I need is boom. Right. So I would take that time, sometimes to help get them in shape so I could pitch a great product, because that was my joy as a writer. And that's probably why I wrote this book. Was these books were like, I just saw so many good things getting passed on because they weren't presenting. They were making these few mistakes that are in the book,
or they were pre-writing the article. I mean,
yeah.
Let me do the writing for you, because clearly I know how to write better than you as the writer.
Yeah.
And not because they really thought that, but because they thought that's what was necessary. They
really thought that's how to do it earnestly, but they were sending that signal that they are not ready for press. So once you understand that, it's similar to this pitch and everything. Now from a designer's point of view, I can see when I'm working with a designer, I'm in the studio, and a rep comes by and they do a couple of things wrong. They drop in, but they don't drop off. They drop in and then they ask for like, hey, or they say, hey, I was just happened to be in the neighborhood and stopping by, and like, that's what everyone says. Or they're bringing something that does not at all fit the direction that you share on your website. Like, I like eco-friendly materials. I look for sustainable stuff, and they're bringing in this,
first.
Yeah. And it's that same thing.
Yes.
They didn't do the research. They didn't take the time. They're not respecting your time. They're not giving you anything you'd be interested in. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And it, as a designer, somebody hands you some fabric or something, and you're like, wow, this couldn't be more not me, or this is so me. It's one of
Right.
those two things.
That's right. That's right. You've mentioned a couple of times, so I just want to touch on it real quickly. I've heard you say this phrase, you're not ready for press. You're not ready for press. What does it look like when they are ready for press?
Okay, so if I'm going to send as a national publication hundreds of thousands of people to your website, the website needs to be ready. It needs to not crash the day I send all those people to that. It needs to really reflect somebody that we've found. It needs to look good. You know, the website is really critical. Because that's where people are going to go too. So they need to be, if we were talking about product, I would never put a product in a magazine or on an online shop that those readers couldn't get immediately right there. Because what would happen if they can't? They're going to come back to the editor, who is in no position to take those calls. So they need to be ready to sell those products when they're in. Any good publication or TV show will prepare you for that now, because they don't want the backlash.
Right.
It means they need to understand that sometimes it doesn't work out. Something gets cut last minute, so that you understand that that doesn't mean a no for now, or you don't like get aggressive towards it. You just understand that that's the way it sometimes works, and that editor is going to, it feels really bad and is going to try to get you in the next issue. That's usually how that works, because it got all the way to that last editor, and then it got bumped or something. So that they've already expressed they like you, but that you kind of become aggressive when something doesn't work out.
So they have a patience and understanding, kind of understanding the process on that side, and respecting that process and how it fits in. Yeah.
And then I will say, the people just on the very basic level, the people that you see sometimes when you get that FOMO, about like, oh, she gets all the press. Here's why. She has great pictures. She responds quickly to an editor request. Like, I'm talking about not within 4 hours, or at least within 4 hours, At least if you can't respond fully, you say, I got it. I'm going to get back to you by the end of the day, because sometimes they don't have the time to wait, because they're on deadline.
Yes.
So editors go back to the people who have great pictures.
Yes, they do.
Quick to respond, who aren't going to cry if it doesn't work out and get upset, and who are ready, happily to make themselves available if for press, if that's what they want. If they want press, they're quick to give a quote. They're helpful. Mm-hmm. They're easy to work
in
with.
The whole process. It's interesting. I have some designers that I work with, of course, I work across the United States, as you do everywhere. Mm-hmm. But I have a fair number here in Georgia. I have a couple in the Atlanta market that have worked with these 4 Atlanta magazines that we were referring to. And they are putting in their magazine, and at the last minute, they realize they have an open spot. And they're calling them, hey, for example, hey, Michelle, I know you were just in this magazine, but we're looking for a picture like this. Do you have a picture, a professional shot in your portfolio that does this? Yes. All right. Can you send it to me? Write up a small blurb. I only need it to be a couple of sentences. It's filler. It may not be the full spread, but it's filler. And sometimes they don't care if it's been published before, because they're using it in a completely different way, or maybe they published it before and they're asking if they can recycle it a year or two later in a different mode.
That's correct.
That relationship, I see a couple of my clients. I mean, I turn around and one of my clients, I'm like, you're literally like in every magazine that's coming out right now. And she said, that's because I met them. I asked them, are you looking for anything in particular? Is there anything that you're highlighting that you need? And then she said, so I sent her a couple of ideas based on what she told me she needed.
Right.
And then later she's starting to call me and I'm answering her. And
that's
that relationship is really, and it's ongoing.
And that's what happens once you come through for these, in keeping it professional, understanding that these editors, they're friendly, but it doesn't mean you have a friendship yet with them. It is a professional relationship. So, but sometimes it can feel very friendly. So you want to be very cautious about, like crossing that line.
Boundaries, yes.
Yeah, about boundaries. Because that person is keeping it professional and saying, hey, I'm here for you. What do you need? I've got some images. And they have proven that they are, maybe they
Or they
are
can do all
able
that
to
work behind it.
manage that
Yes.
relationship. That's when the editors will start coming back to you. They will give you the email. You won't even have to be pitching them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And I have some designers that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
All the way up the seaboard, right?
Yeah.
Up in the Northeast as well. They're sitting waiting. They know there's a project. They know that project's fitting something that they have going, and they are literally waiting on the project to be done. Now that's not that first introduction, as we mentioned. It's after I would say an extended relationship, but it can shift. The relationship can shift as our relationships do.
And just to wrap this up, we might need to have another session because we have a lot to talk about.
No doubt.
A lot to share. But again, just to it is the relationship that you want, and it's going to take time. That you're going to have to put time into getting prepared for press. The pictures, the pitch. It takes time to really whittle down a big idea into a few key sentences.
It is very hard. It is very
easy.
hard.
So you could maybe get some help there if that's too hard to do. And then you're going to have to pitch, and then you're going to have to follow up, and where am I going to get the editors?
You're going to have to wait.
All that, and then you're going to have to wait. But I would say this: don't pitch if you're not going to follow up. I'd say don't even waste the time on it, because the follow-up is probably where half of the placements come. And just be consistent, because something's going to happen. You cannot put energy. You cannot read my book. First of all, you can't read the book, and then I will know you've got the information you need to begin this journey. Okay, so I've told you everything that you need to know. You can't put energy towards this effort and not have it return something.
Right.
Something will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. Tell us where we can find you.
Okay. I'm so happy to say that it's amyflurry.com. It's a newly, redesigned website with all of the communications activities that I do. You can find the products there, a really great media list that's affordable, that is updated, that we sell, both books. And then you can see where I do one-on-one consults with interior designers. And then I'm a communications partner to a few key brands. And so all of that is there, consolidated on my website, amyflurry.com. Easy.
Excellent. Amy, thank you so much for such a great conversation today. Like you said, the fun thing about talking business with like-minded individuals, I bet most of my podcast presenters, we could literally go on for days.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But that just shows that we're passionate and we care. And so I just thank you for taking the time today to jump in and share with everybody.
I'm so happy. It's exciting to see what you're doing here. The success that you are bringing to well-deserving interior designers. It's a complex business, and I've seen you, do that so well and so patiently, and give people the confidence that they need in their business. They are business women and men, and the communications is just one, arm of that business, and can be a creative and a fun one, but definitely there to support the business.
Right. Thank you so much.
What you do. Oh yeah. Thank you for having me. Okay. Take care, Michelle.
Bye. It was a great conversation with Amy, discussing all the ins and outs of being ready for press and knowing the proper way to pitch your designs for publication, and of course, what not to do. Getting press can make you profitable, and how you handle that money is important. Check out my newest course, Master Your Profit, which teaches the Profit First methodology for the interior design and creative industries. You can find it at scarletthread.com or at masteryourprofitnow.com. Don't forget, profit doesn't happen by accident.